Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. Today we're going to once again be discussing House Elves, but this time from a slightly different angle. I've already explored their history and I've already taken a closer look at how they ended up in servitude, but one thing I've never dissected in much detail is how powerful they are. I suspect that when most people are asked to imagine examples of extreme magical power in the Harry Potter universe, their minds would almost invariably wander towards wizards like Voldemort, Dumbledore, or Grindelwald, imposing figures that we see perform all sorts of impressive spells and curses. I'm sure they don't think of a 2-foot-tall creature wearing a tea towel. But the truth is, overlooking these tiny magical beings is a huge oversight, because when it comes to raw magical power, they're up there. Today we're going to be breaking down what House Elves can actually do, how they compare to wizard kind, whether Dobby was exceptional, and whether one of the most powerful magical races in the series has been hiding in plain sight all along. Let's dive into it. First things first, what is a House Elf? In the Harry Potter world, House Elves are magical creatures that are bound to serve their masters willingly and without question. Standing at a diminutive height, measuring around 2 to 3 feet, House Elves possess petite and slender bodies. And atop their tiny bald heads, they have large bat-like ears. They can often be seen wearing small pieces of fabric resembling tea towels, and can only be freed from their servitude through an ancient and magical bond called the giving of clothes. But despite their small statures, it would be foolish to think that their magical powers have any correlation, because from a lot of what we've seen in the books and films, it almost seems like they're more powerful than a lot of witches and wizards. And that's not hyperbole. It's one of the clearest recurring patterns in the books. House Elves are constantly underestimated because of their appearance and status, not because of their actual magical ability. So what is it about elven magic specifically that makes House Elves so formidable? Well, quite a lot of things. For starters, elves just have a completely different relationship to magic than your average witch or wizard. Let me explain. According to Harry Potter lore, magic is an inherent part of the fabric of the universe and exists as a kind of energy that can be harnessed and manipulated by those with the ability to do so, those possessing the appropriate genetic makeup. This theory is supported by the fact that magic is present in various forms in the natural world, such as in the plants and animals that inhabit it. Magic is also closely linked to the psyche, presenting itself as a manifestation of the power of the mind. This theory is supported by the fact that many magical spells and incantations in the series involve the use of intention and visualization, as well as the power of belief. Witches, wizards, and other creatures who possess magical abilities bear a gene that allows them to exploit the natural forces of magic. This is reinforced by J.K. Rowling. Magic is a supernatural force that changes aspects of the world at fundamental levels. The ability for humans to use magic is a hereditary trait passed down from a person's ancestors, which allows witches and wizards to practice it. Rather than being a mystical or a natural pursuit that defied the laws of nature, however, magic simply allowed those who could wield it to exploit them in very specific and creative ways that Muggle sciences were unable to replicate. In essence, witches and wizards are essentially advanced or mutated human beings that have either inherited the ability to exploit magic through their ancestry or, in rarer occasions, independently developed the ability to exploit magic through a genetic mutation. They have advanced physiologies, heightened perception, and if trained enough, have the ability to control the world's elements to some extent. Basically, witches and wizards are just enhanced humans, which means that their existence pre-magic is the same as the original ancestors of humans who are thought to have first existed about 6 million years ago. Over millions of years, humans developed and evolved, which is why, eventually, humans started showing supernatural capabilities like the ability to perform magic. But if you think about it, House Elves appear to sit in a different category entirely. They don't read like ordinary humanoids who later acquired access to magic. They read as beings for whom magic is part of their baseline nature from the very beginning. A wizard, generally speaking, is a human being who can use magic. A House Elf appears to be a magical being who is magic. And while this may just sound like semantics, I think that in practice it helps explain why elven magic often feels so different than the magic that human wizards perform. Human wizards interact with magic through learned systems. They study incantations, wand movements, concentration, and intention. Magic is something they access, refine, and direct. House Elves, by contrast, seem to express magic more instinctively. They don't attend Hogwarts, study magical theory, or even use any sort of instrument to channel their magic, like wands. We also don't see a single example of an elf muttering an incantation. But despite all of this, we see them perform magical feats that would challenge highly trained witches and wizards. And to me, that suggests a more organic relationship with magical force itself. If wizard magic is comparable to learning how to operate a machine, elven magic is more like a bird using its wings. It's an ability woven into the creature's very design. In the past, I made a video discussing what it is that makes wizards like Voldemort and Dumbledore so different than others, and I made the argument that Voldemort and Dumbledore are simply more mutated. They represent a higher tier of magical evolution, and their genetic makeup and physiological traits are fine-tuned to an extent rarely seen in wizarding history. The idea of being more mutated could explain why they could achieve feats that other witches and wizards could only dream of. And while most magical beings are like radios, tuned to receive the frequencies of magic, Dumbledore and Voldemort were like precision instruments, capable of tuning into the rarest and most powerful frequencies with ease, possessing minds and bodies that were deeply attuned to the magical forces of the universe. If we go by this theory, then their power is rooted in their very biology, possessing bodies and minds that were simply better equipped to harness the full potential of magic. And I think that perhaps elven magic takes this one step further, and that may be why elf magic often appears so direct. When Dobby apparates or levitates an object, we don't get the same sense that he is casting a spell in the formal wizarding sense. He's simply doing what a house elf can do. I also think that's why schools like Hogwarts would never be able to teach students to the extent that they can replicate elven abilities. Wizards command elves socially and benefit from their labor, but they can't even begin to understand the mechanics of elven magic itself because it's just not in their biology. The intrinsic but underutilized power of house elves also exposes a blind spot in wizarding arrogance. But before we continue, I just want to mention that only 30% of you are subscribed, so if you enjoy the content, please consider subscribing to help support future content. The wizarding world often places witches and wizards at the top of the hierarchy, assuming that wand magic represents the highest form of magical sophistication. But the text repeatedly hints that other beings possess forms of magic that are older, stranger, or less limited by human systems. Centaurs read the stars. Goblins possess metallurgical magic, and phoenixes demonstrate miraculous regenerative properties. Magic produced from house elves may not be taught in school or categorized in textbooks, but its raw effectiveness is hard to ignore. Okay, so they're powerful, but what can they actually do? I think the best way to put it is that they do the basics extraordinarily well. One of the clearest examples of this is Apparition. In the Harry Potter series, Apparition is treated as a fairly advanced branch of magic. Adult witches and wizards require training to do it properly, must pass a ministry test to perform it legally, and even then it carries obvious risk. We hear repeatedly about splinching, misdirection, and the danger of attempting it under pressure. But house elves seem to operate under an entirely different set of rules. They can apparate effortlessly, repeatedly, and with a remarkable precision, and notably they appear capable of doing so in places where witches and wizards cannot. The most obvious example of this is Hogwarts itself. Hogwarts is famously protected by enchantments that prevent apparition and disapparition, yet Dobby is able to appear inside the castle with no issue at all. Later in the story, we see similar implications elsewhere, where house elf movement doesn't appear bound by the same restrictions that govern human magical travel. To me, that suggests that elf apparition is not simply a stronger version of wizard apparition, but something categorically different. Wizards may be manipulating space through one magical process, while elves are accessing it through another entirely. And if that's true, then house elves possess an ability that bypasses some of the most sophisticated magical defenses in the wizarding world. There's also the matter of speed. When witches and wizards cast magic, there is often a sequence involved. Draw the wand, perform the movement, speak the incantation if necessary, and execute it properly. But house elves seem to skip much of that process. Their magic manifests instantly, with no preparation necessary. Basically, they're infinitely more efficient. But house elves don't just apparate, and in the Chamber of Secrets, we get to see a rare example of their offensive capabilities, when Dobby confronts Lucius Malfoy. After Dobby is freed, he overpowers Lucius with ease, violently blasting him backward with some sort of instantaneous, non-verbal, wandless spell. Lucius Malfoy stood frozen, staring at the elf. Then he lunged at Harry. "You've lost me my servant, boy." But Dobby shouted, "You shall not harm Harry Potter." There was a loud bang, and Mr. Malfoy was thrown backward. As fun as it is to knock Lucius, and as incompetent as he can be, he is still an adult wizard with a full wizarding education behind him and an above-average level of magical mastery. But despite all of this, his 2-foot-tall former slave makes a mockery of him. The Battle of Hogwarts reinforces their offensive capabilities even further. Kreacher leads the Hogwarts House Elves into battle against Voldemort's forces, and while the image of elves charging with kitchen knives is often treated humorously, the reality is far more significant. The House Elves of Hogwarts swarmed into the entrance hall, screaming and waving carving knives and cleavers, and at their head, the locket of Regulus Black bouncing on his chest, was Kreacher, his bullfrog's voice audible even above this din. "Fight, fight, fight for my master, defender of House Elves. Fight the Dark Lord in the name of brave Regulus. Fight." They entered the conflict because they were genuinely capable of contributing in a meaningful way. Fast, fearless, difficult to predict, and magically potent, House Elves were probably one of the good guys' best assets in that fight, even if the spotlight wasn't placed on them. Now, does this mean that House Elves are stronger than every witch or wizard? I don't think the answer is that simple. When discussing figures like Dumbledore or Voldemort, we are dealing with individuals whose magical power is paired with immense knowledge, creativity, discipline, and decades of experience, plus the genetic advantages over other wizards I mentioned earlier. If we look at the history books, we can easily see that the most powerful beings to have ever graced the wizarding world have been humans. Merlin, Morgana, the Hogwarts founders, Voldemort, Dumbledore. But with that said, not all witches and wizards are powerful, and I would argue that their innate level of power is significantly lower than where a house elf sits. However, their ceiling of power, if you will, seems to be the highest, at least from what we can tell. Raw magical ability is only one component of power. Intelligence, versatility, emotional control, and understanding of magical theory all play their part. So I would hesitate to say that house elves simply surpass the greatest wizards across the board. But I will say this, we've also never seen a house elf that studied magic and actually had the freedom or the desire to immerse themselves in magical theory. So perhaps there is another level of magic achievable in the Harry Potter universe that we just haven't seen. And if we compare house elves to the average wizard, it's abundantly clear that house elves have a number of advantages. The average wizard can't apparate into Hogwarts. The average wizard can't perform complex, wandless magic with effortless consistency, and the average wizard becomes dramatically less dangerous when disarmed. We also know that magical children without any sort of magical education lack any control over their magic whatsoever, which is exactly why, before studying at Hogwarts, magical children are so prone to accidental, uncontrolled magic, which can be triggered by strong emotions like anger, fear, or confusion. House elves don't have this issue. Now that we've discussed house elves on the whole, let's turn our attention to Dobby. How powerful was he? Well, throughout the series, Dobby repeatedly alters major events. He seals the barrier to platform 9 3/4, enchants a bludger to relentlessly target Harry, infiltrates Hogwarts, gathers information, tracks people, rescues prisoners from Malfoy Manor, disarms Death Eaters, and successfully extracts multiple people from one of the most dangerous locations in Britain. This would be an extraordinary resume for any magical being, let alone one with no wand and no formal magical education. But does that mean Dobby was just uniquely gifted? I really don't think so. But he did have something a lot of other house elves lack: independence. He was willing to think for himself, act for himself, and direct his abilities according to his own conscience rather than the expectations placed upon him. In that sense, Dobby may not have revealed a level of power exclusive to himself. He may have revealed what house elves in general are capable of when they are free to choose how that power is used. And that, to me, is the real conclusion here. House elves were never weak. They were never magically insignificant. Their abilities were simply channeled into service for so long that wizarding society stopped recognizing what it was looking at. And I think that beneath the aprons, tea towels, and household chores was a species possessing one of the most unusual and effective forms of magic in the entire series. If you want to know the full history of house elves, or why creatures so magically gifted found themselves enslaved by wizards, then check out one of my other videos shown on screen, or in the pinned comment. Also, if you enjoy the content, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, remember, it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live.